It's time to watch the TPP. It's time to watch the TPP.
Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is currently in negotiation among 12 Pacific Rim countries that account for 40% now of the global economy. U.S., Japan, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and then on the other side of the Pacific we have Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, and Brunei, negotiating behind closed doors for the past 4 years an agreement that really is not about trade. They call it a trade agreement, but it actually is, there are only 5 chapters of 29 that we know about that have anything to do with trade at all. What you think of as setting quotas and tariffs on goods and so forth. What's really in the TPP is it's a backdoor way for corporations to get the types of things they haven't been able to get through our domestic democratic processes. We see big pharma, the largest pharmaceutical corporations, using these negotiations as a way to push extended patents, which basically means extending their monopolies, keeping drug prices high longer than before. And so that impacts the ability for generic drugs to be able to compete and bring our drug prices down. Everyone in the United States is up in arms about medicine prices. This has life and death consequences in some of the other TPP countries, where you see people living with HIV and AIDS who will no longer have access to life-saving drugs if those drug prices go up. So that's just one example.
A healthy environment is under attack. No TPP. No fast track. Human rights are under attack. No TPP and no fast track.
Fast track is a mechanism that's a very extreme delegation of Congress's authority. In the United States, our Constitution says that Congress has the authority over global trade agreements. The executive can negotiate, but Congress sets the terms. But what fast track is, it started in the 1970s. It was under Nixon, where they said, actually, why don't we just transfer all of the power over to the executive? They can sign an agreement without Congress knowing what's in it, then can bring it back to Congress for only an up and down vote with no amendments. It's the only legislation that is not written by Congress. It's written by the executive. They set the timeline of when it is put before Congress. So it's extreme delegation of authority. And that's the only way they can get these broad trade agreements through Congress, because the only way that because if people know, and there's actually a debate about what's happening, they know it will be opposed. There is actually a strong coalition in Congress that does not think this is a good idea. Democrats who are very concerned about our past trade policy and the direction of the agreement, and Republicans who are actually very concerned from a structural standpoint to delegate their authority over to the president. And so President Obama's going to have a hard time, and we're going to make sure that that's a hard time, because we want to make sure that actually, if an agreement is brought before the U.S. public, we have an opportunity to debate it, make sure the provisions actually benefit us. We have a very user-friendly activist website called exposethetpp.org that has lots of different it has a lot of fact sheets about some of the different provisions, so they can get educated, has ways to get involved through social media, ways to get involved electronically, and ways to get organized in communities. We're part of a broad coalition in the U.S. called the Citizens Trade Campaign that includes major labor unions, environmental organizations, faith-based organizations, family farmers, development organizations, consumers, that have all come together and are really looking at this agreement and making sure that what we're seeing does not actually come to pass. And we do think that it's very vulnerable, and that this is not a done deal. They attempted to have this type of broad deal for the 34 countries of the Americas, and it did not finish because there was citizen opposition across all of the countries, and that's what's happening with the TPP. And so we think that's what's going to happen this time as well.